Why handicapping is wrong for competitive play. An audio reading of Cuthbert's post. Author's note. Players, please like and share this post if you agree that MMR should be removed from competitive play. In 3 polls on the Battle.net forum, we have voted overwhelmingly in favour at 403 to 50, 320 to 42, 295 to 56. On this forum, we have also voted in favour at 528 to 94. Objective. I argue to remove matchmaking rating, MMR, from competitive matchmaking. In competitive matchmaking, MMR ensures the type of match that Blizzard wants to have. Hotly contested as long as possible, with a 50% chance of either team to win. But true competitive players want no such guarantee. And because the matchmaking system ensures those 50% odds by arranging teams based on hidden skill metrics, MMR, it covertly handicaps competitive matches, favors new players over experienced players, fails to prove the skill difference between players, requires prohibitively long wait times for well-formed groups, and lowers the quality of gameplay across all competitive tiers. How is such a travesty possible? It is possible because most players do not realize their matches are being handicapped. And those of us who know of handicapping fail to see its implications. Overwatch's own designers seem to have missed the point. Overview. Overwatch's designers say their balance matches with MMR. The system sorts the 12 players from each match into teams based on merit each player has shown in past matches. Matchmaking uses merit tracking algorithms, MMR, to keep matches from being uneven. Principal Overwatch designer Scott Mercer explains. When a matchmaker creates a match, it determines the percentage chance for each team to win based on the match it made. The vast majority of matches are usually near to 50%. When we do put you in a match that we know isn't a 50-50, we adjust your SR gain or loss based on your calculated chance of winning. We model the synergistic effects of players being together in a group. Based upon the data we see in groups, we predict the percentage chance for each team. We try to match similar sized groups together. The amount of MMR and SR you go up or down simply isn't a matter of whether you won or lost, and what's your predicted chance of winning. There's a couple of other things at work. One is the matchmaker's confidence in what your MMR should be. Play a lot of games, it gets more certain. Don't play Overwatch for a while, it gets less certain. You go on a large loss or win streak, it gets less certain. The more certain the matchmaker is about your MMR, the less your MMR will change in either direction based on a win or loss. We also do evaluate how well you played the heroes you use in a match. The comparison is based on historical data of people playing specific heroes, and we've done a lot of work to this system based on the community's feedback. While it is a minor factor compared to win-loss ratio, doing so does help us determine your skill more accurately and faster. That concludes the interview. However, in quick play, we do not count wins and losses as we do in competitive play. We do not stake our rank and reputation on a number like we do with SR, and MMR skews everyone's SR. Because if you are a relatively skilled player for your SR, handicapping makes your teams worse than they should be on average, by random chance. Semantics. Balance versus handicap. This discussion has a fulcrum, a single word it turns around, a word that Blizzard has chosen incorrectly, misappropriated from the design parlances of casual, non-competitive games. The word is balance, which is actually handicapping in the context of a competitive game. Dictionary.com defines a handicap contest as one in which certain disadvantages or advantages are placed upon competitors to equalize their chances of winning. For example, in Old Quebec, parishioners had a tradition of racing home from church in a horse-drawn sleigh or wagon, which they would handicap by placing different numbers and sizes of passengers in either vehicle. That's an example of a friendly competition where handicapping is appropriate, because the important thing isn't who wins the race, it's the closeness of the race and the fun to be had along the way. The race itself is merely a pretense for a good time. Any scoring that took place between drivers would be unjust. That is what some of us expect from a game mode like Quick Play. But players expect competitive play to be different. We have a skill rating, SR, that ticks up or down when we lose. That number is both our reputation and our right to compete with other players of our caliber. Handicapping makes light of that number, and in turn, it makes light of competitive Overwatch players. When you play competitive Overwatch, you may be a horse pulling your team along, or you may be a passenger just along for the ride, and the handicapping system might designate you as such correctly or incorrectly. But those designations happen to determine the nature of every match you play. This is where the difference between individual and team competition comes in. Players participate in matches as teams, but they participate in the SR system as individuals. Handicapping teams is not the same as treating individuals fairly in the SR system. Blizzard wrongly conflates those ideas, distorting players' very notion of what fair competition is and what they are doing in competitive play. Blizzard says that handicapping matches makes them more fair for competitive players, and that is false. Forced 50% win rate. When players talk about this, they are trying to talk about handicapping. An argument against handicapping has already taken place in the Overwatch community, based on vague terms and phrases that do not address the problem. Without clear terms to inform the discussion, players have turned away from it like a losing battle. But handicapping is a real gaming term that many players understand. It is the word with history, meaning, and a proper definition. I bring you the word handicapping as a banner to rally under. I urge you players, use this word to understand what MMR truly is, to frame your own discussions, and petition Blizzard for competitive play that is free of handicapping. Case in point, in every match, MMR tells matchmaking which players are relatively strong and which players are relatively weak. The MMR system does not pool all of the strongest or weakest players on either team, because it predicts that as a one-sided match. Instead, matchmaking ensures that both teams have a balanced number of strong and weak players. If one or two players from either team are real standouts, the ratio of strong and weak players might be closer to 2 to 4, or even 1 to 5 on either team. MMR is free to place the next best 6 players in the match to oppose the one single individual player, and it often does. The degree of difference in skills between players is different in every match, but MMR picks up on every discernible difference between players. According to those differences in player skills, matchmaking arranges the teams and effectively handicaps matches, with no regard for individual players' SRs outside of the 1000 unit range. So, what's the problem? These kinds of matches are unproductive by design. They consistently prove as little as possible about the relative skills of the players participating. When matchmaking uses MMR to mix strong players with weak players, it guarantees in every match that some strong players will move down the rank and some players will move up. Hypothetically speaking, the most productive match is one where all of the 6 strongest players are on one team and all of the 6 weakest players are on the other. Because in the win-loss result, the strongest players all gain SR and the weakest players all lose SR. Even an impartial matchmaking system would not produce this type of match all the time. But handicapping turns it into a unicorn. MMR circumvents the natural selection process that is supposed to be taking place in competitive play. It makes the SR system inefficient, stagnant, and keeps the SR system from sorting players according to their merit. Evidence of handicapping. Here are 3 simple things you can observe for yourself, which show how matchmaking and MMR handicaps your matches. Group up and queue for matches with other players who you know are good at Overwatch. You will see that your wait times for matches scales up in direct proportion to how good you are and how many of you are in a group. While there are groups available to play at your collective SR level, matchmaking takes time to seek a group with an equal MMR profile. Win matches as a group, and you will see your wait times increase from match to match. Matchmaking delays your games in order to handicap them based on your group's record. Again, there are other groups available to play at your collective SR level, but matchmaking takes the time to seek a group with an equal MMR profile. Note the spread of players' experience, portrait, color, stars across teams when you join matches in small groups or solo queue. You'll see the teams in each game have the roughly the same number of experienced and inexperienced players. The matchmaking system arranges teams in this way to handicap matches. It's relative. Whether or not you sense the skewing of your matches depends on how good you are as a team player and where you find your SR rank to be. But if you are a relatively skilled player for your SR, then handicapping is designed to make every match difficult for you specifically. It sounds like a persecution fantasy, but it's patently real. Fighting your own shadow. Under MMR's influence, every player has to fight their weight in every match, regardless of SR standing. Handicapping ensures that every standout player finds a double ganger or a set of players on the enemy team who are able to counteract them. This might sound fair-handed, but let me explain why it's not. Suppose your SR is low for your skill level and you are the best player of 12 in the match. In that case, handicapping singles you out by placing all of the next best players on the match to the enemy team. Hence, you, like a baited bear, must counteract their joint efforts. That becomes the self-perpetuating cycle. The harder you try, the more you kill, heal, and play the objective, the more skilled opponents you will face in your next match. The more skilled teammates you will be separated from. The challenge of the game is literally guaranteed to ramp up whether or not you win your present match, whether you climb or fall in the SR system, as long as you try your hardest. It is not good enough to be good, to climb in SR. MMR follows you from match to match, figuring out how good you are. Then, it enforces matchmaking, which forces you to be better than yourself if you want to advance. In this way, you can experience the same difficulty playing at most competitive ranks, regardless of how good you are. From a game design perspective, this seems like a magic formula, a dream. But from a player's perspective, it is a nightmare. Handicapping favors inexperienced players. If you are experienced players, you have a strong interest in MMR's removal from matchmaking. MMR ensures that players of similar experience will be distributed evenly across teams. Again, this might sound fair-handed, but let me explain why it's not. If you are the most experienced player in a match, handicapping teams you with the most inexperienced players in the match while placing the second, third, and even fourth most experienced to oppose you on the enemy team. It is inexperienced players who benefit from that arrangement, and experienced players who suffer. You may deny the correlation of experience and skill. Why then does matchmaking never place a slew of experienced players against a slew of inexperienced players? It is interesting to see the outcome of such a match. Or is it no contest? Why doesn't handicapping allow those matches to take place? Devalued experience. Inexperienced players think that they are being tested by placement matches and regular competitive matches in the same way that experienced players are tested. So, a player with less than 1 star of experience assumes that they are equal to all players at their SR level, regardless of experience. It does not occur to inexperienced players that they have arrived at their SR standing through the assistance of a handicap. And who can blame them? The handicapping system is hidden, after all. But it is not fair to experienced players that they should be forced to contribute to the success of less experienced players. New players have a right to prove themselves in competitive play, but they do not have a right to be braced by veterans in every match and escorted to victory. Handicapping has caused millions, maybe even billions of pointless arguments between experienced players and newbies who will not accept their advice or command. New players deride experienced players for not being higher ranked for all their hours of practice. And since newbies and vets alike are unaware of the handicapping system, the situation suggests to everyone that experience counts for nothing. Classification without consent. It is not only about the number of stars under your portrait. If you are the best healer, tank or DPS in a match, then MMR brands you as such. It pits you against the next best player in your hero class. This might sound fair, but if you step out of one role to fill another, your team is most likely to crumble. Because no one on your team matches your proficiency with the hero or class you switch from. This effectively locks you into a role without your knowledge or consent. And it ensures you if you are proficient with many or all of Overwatch's heroes, classes, and characters, you gain no advantage from it. Handicapping MMR discourages groups and teamwork. By punishing outstanding performances, handicapping catches the most effective Overwatch strategies in its snare. When a group chooses characters who complement one another, they create statistical anomalies that the MMR system corrects it for in its matchmaking problem. When a coherent group presents itself, the MMR system painstakingly matches them against equally coherent groups, despite the availability of less coherent groups of the same size at the same SR level. Not only does that mean prohibitively long wait times for everyone involved, it costs such coherent groups the advantages that they are supposed to have by working out strategies and vetting their teammates. MMR costs coherent groups countless opportunities to apply strategies against opponents who do not. It negates the advantage a coherent group might naturally have under an impartial matchmaking system. Conversely, handicapping coddles players who ignore the principles of a good strategy, sheltering them from a competition with coherently good groups that they should be facing in their SR level. MMR makes Overwatch antithesis of a team-based game. A running contradiction to the idea that group cohesion and synergy means anything at all. Handicapping promotes DPS insta-lock. Healing and tanking are desperately ineffective when you have unskilled players filling the other roles. Solo players know this intuitively, and this is why we start every match pleading for sanity with our 3 to 5 DPS insta-locks. Despite the players, if you will, but they are acting in their best interest under the handicapping system. When a player climbs in SR by playing DPS well, they are incessantly locked into that role. That is because handicapping ensures that equally skilled DPS players are in subsequent matches will be placed on the enemy team, so changing to tank or heal leaves the enemy DPS unchecked. The leaderboards are absolutely dominated by DPS players. It is because DPS characters are intrinsically more effective than tanks and healers, or is it because they have an advantage in the MR system? Esports above all. Blizzard wants to use competitive play as a mere spectacle, not a proving system for players who understand the game. The players who are truly the best at the game of Overwatch. Those experienced and skilled players are buried in the middle tiers, the dumping grounds into which they are swept by a never-ending stream of new Overwatch players. New players have no problem qualifying for gold and higher because of the boost that handicapping gives them. Meanwhile, Smurf accounts buyers scramble all over us, drowning like swimmers, clawing their way out by pushing the rest of us down. They're gaming the MMR system that Blizzard has created by giving them more money. Is it any surprise that Blizzard is complacent in their behavior? What this means for players. It violates the faith that we have all had in competitive play, that we can climb the ranks of the SR system by showing merits as team players. SR is our only form of rank and reputation, but when we show our true merit, an invisible hand guides us to challenges that are virtually assured to destroy our SR, our rank and reputation. Performance-based SR. Performance-based SR is Blizzard's feeble attempt to restore the meritocracy of competitive play, to offset the profound SR skewed effects of handicapping. It is a tactic admission that the SR system fails its supposed function of ranking players according to their skill. Performance-based SR means that Overwatch players do not share the goal of victory with their teammates. The most cynical and well-informed players give up on victory to game the system. One-tricking. One-tricking is a natural consequence of performance-based SR. When players see that they are being graded on their own stats rather than individual win or lose ratio result of the match, it demotivates them from being a real team player. Instead of doing what is best for their team's chances of winning a match, they start doing what's best for their own chances of ranking up big numbers in damage, heals, and kills. Reverse karma. MMR works like reverse karma. It restricts our mobility in the SR system. If you are interested to watch your SR trend up and down, and figuring out what strategies involve your win and losses, then no governing system outside of SR and your own group selection can serve your interests. Double standard. In SR or MMR, we have a set of systems that judge us on the performance of our team as a whole, which is SR, but divide us on our individual merit, which is MMR, at every instance. It is a galling and obvious double standard. While SR decides the level we are allowed to compete at, the majority of us are stuck in a quagmire we cannot climb out from, because rising up makes you a target for handicapping to strike down. Artificial equality. A handicapped match is much more likely to hang in the balance, making it more exciting for players. But, by handicapping a match, MMR makes its outcome intrinsically unrelated to the skill of individual players and groups participating. It is absurd to increase or decrease SR based on wins or losses of handicapped matches. No competitive Overwatch players has a fair chance of winning a match according to their skill. Because of handicapping, unskilled players are more likely to win and skilled players are more likely to lose. Stop worrying and love MMR? Once you realize what MMR is doing to your odds in competitive play, it is still possible to enjoy yourself. If you think you can rank up, you just have to recognize that you are guaranteed to be teamed up with a statistically unlikely number of inferior players in every match, but don't ignore the fact that, or you'll go insane. Handicapping defies pattern recognition. Pattern recognition is our birthright as human beings who evolved to use the very stars for navigation. Our brains have grown to run advanced heuristics in wars and heated battles against enemy tribes. Games like Overwatch are allegories for wars, which we play to enjoy our faculties for pattern recognition. But, handicapping circumvents the maths that we would use to understand Overwatch and game an impartial matchmaking system. It contradicts the calculations that we make, based on reasonable assumptions about how matchmaking works. We assume that matchmaking is impartial, but that is not true. We have come to the end of this audio recording. I did not read the full post. If you would like to read the full post, the link is in the description. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.